Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Mental Health Warrior. I hope everybody's having a great Wednesday evening. I'm super excited about the show today because, as you can see, there's 4 people on the screen today, and I'm super excited. I'm very happy to have JJ from Brady United, and also Colleen, also from Brady United, and of course my co-host Lynn is there also. And so I'm really thankful for everybody that tuned in today. Just real quick, if you missed this podcast, or if you want to listen to it again, it's super easy to do. I'm on Reason Across America Radio. They show the podcast on Fridays at 8 p.m. and then they replay it again on Sunday is at 10 p.m. Super easy to find. You just download your favorite app, whether it's iHeartRadio app, your TuneIn app, your Odyssey app. Search for Wreath. And oh, by the way, Wreath is the number one search in for the apps for the radio. So I thought that's kind of funny. But then Reads Across America Radio pops up and you click follow and you can listen to all the great programming that they have and everything. And then if you look up over here, that's this one right there, the little QR code. That's for Reads Across America Radio. You can click on that. You can go out and donate for Reese. So you ensure that, all of our fallen soldiers and airmen and Marines and sailors can have that wreath on their gravesite over the holidays. December 16th, I think, is the day they do it. And so it's very important. And so please, if you can donate, it's just $5. It supports a lot of, just so you know that my area is Arlington Cemetery. And so that's the area that's covered. But if they do oversell for Arlington, they do put the wreaths out into other veteran cemeteries that may be short on wreaths. So they do spread it out if they do oversell on Arlington Cemetery. So with that, Lynn, what do you have going on today?
All right, so I got some fun stuff. Like I looked up the month of October. I like to do that. What we're celebrating for like the national month. So 2 fun things. It's National Pizza Month, and everybody likes pizza, right?
I want that
And
pizza
then
tonight for dinner.
right, and then we have it's Sarcastic Month, and so I know a lot of us military veterans. We can definitely relate to that. But more importantly, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and it's very important for all women to get checked up. Like for me, myself, it runs in my family, so getting checked up between the ages of 35 and 40 is actually ideal for a lot of us. So that once a year checkup, and it's very important. I know there's some you could probably look up some clinics or go to the VA to get that done for free. And another serious note that it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so you might not know that one of your friends might be suffering from this, but it's important to learn those signs too. So I just wanted to point that out for the month of October. But I'm super excited to have 2 guests on our show, JJ and Colleen. And so I'm excited to learn more about what the Brady Foundation is all about. So go ahead and take it from me, Cliff.
Yeah. So, hey, JJ, why don't you tell my audience what great and awesome job or things you do there for Brady? I know I had the distinct pleasure of meeting you through the campaign, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But also, I met you in person when I went up and actually did a recording for the Red, Blue, and Brady podcast. And I want to tell you, you guys' studio up there is freaking awesome.
Thank you. My home studio right now with the beautiful moving blanket is really not selling how beautiful our in-person studio is. So shout out to Switch and Board in DC. They do an amazing job for us. But yeah, hi. Thank you so much for coming on my podcast initially, and then for having us on for Girls Night here on the podcast, which I appreciate. My name, as you mentioned, is JJ. I have the immense honor of being the producer, now finishing up its 4th season, of a podcast devoted to gun violence prevention and all its different forms and all its different ways of solving this uniquely American epidemic. And so we're finishing up our 4th season. It's going to be over 250 episodes now that we've put together with amazing guests like yourselves.
Wow.
And so that's kind of the biggest joy I have at Brady, is just I get to listen to people for a living, and somehow they keep giving me a salary. I don't know how this podcasting as a career kind of happened. You just get to ask people to tell you about their lives. It's amazing. It's great. And then Colleen, I guess maybe I'll use my own podcasting mic and be like, okay,
there you go. Yeah, go ahead.
Tell us about you and what you do at Brady.
Sure. So I've been with Brady for about 1.5 years now, and I come to Brady from the field of suicidology. So I come with a strong passion on saving lives. And how we do that with our End Family Fire program, and which is where I'm the director, is through kind of a three-tiered system. So through End Family Fire, we talk about unintentional injury by firearms, we talk about suicide by firearms, and then as mentioned before, since it's the month, intentional. So that's everything from domestic violence to homicides to school shootings. Because what we're realizing is 76% of all school shootings stem from a gun that was acquired within the home when someone should not have had access. So really excited about today's conversation.
Yeah, thank you for that. It is very important, and I was very honored, obviously to be part of that campaign and what it's doing. And it's interesting that you guys come on this Domestic Awareness Month. But yeah, it's so important, for people who have weapons in their homes or guns in their homes, and we talked about this before.
Yeah.
To put the gun locks on it and make sure that those weapons are secured in a manner that fits your family and your level of gun ownership. I know a lot of people out there like myself that that has we have guns that my guns are utilitarian, so they have a purpose. Right, so I have my hunting rifle if I'm hunting long distances. I have my hunting rifle if I'm shooting in a kind of a brushy type foresty area. And then I have my pistols that I go out and I hang out with friends and shoot for fun. But I say this all the time, and I said this during the campaign, and it's very important. Is if you don't feel the need to put gun locks on all of your guns, which you should, but if you feel the need not to, I say this all the time as a suicide survivor, I want you to put a gun lock on that gun. And by that gun, I mean the one that you spend a lot of money on, the one you always take to the range, the one and the one you trust. Could be the one you named, who knows? At least, if anything, I want you to put your gun lock on that gun, because I know for a fact that if you're in a moment of crisis, that's going to be the weapon that you're going to go to. And it's very important for veterans. I'm talking to veterans.
And if I could jump in too, so that time is critical. So when someone's in crisis, access to a gun, like you're saying, their key, their favorite, the one that they're going to go to, it increases the likelihood of suicide by 300%. So access to a gun when you're having a crisis increases likelihood, but also most of them are fatal, right? With other means, maybe you have a chance at surviving. 90% of the time you don't with firearm. Unfortunately, you don't even have time to make it to the hospital. Most of the deaths are in the home or outside. And the key is, like we said earlier, if you even just collapse that window down to giving someone a second shot or a second chance, one of the reasons, if they do attempt to take their own life and survive, 95% of the time, they're not going to go back and try to attempt their life again. So like what you're exactly saying, that lock, right? Whatever it looks like, there's a lot of different storage devices out there. Whatever your choice of a lock is, just that small barrier and that small window, you're enabling them to have another attempt at saving their life.
Well, just anything to stop their train of thought for a second, because now you're in that moment. You're thinking about all the stuff that brought you to that moment, but now you have to concentrate on something else, and you're resetting your mind a little bit to take this gun lock off, right? And that's why this campaign was so important, because I know for a fact that having that second to think differently can make all the difference in the world. Now, I will tell you that when I did the campaign, something my family didn't know about my suicide attempt and caused a lot of phone calls from family and friends is the fact that I looked for my brother's gun in his house when I first was going to attempt, and I couldn't, and I didn't find his weapon, little 38 special that he had. So, even though I searched and couldn't find it, I probably wouldn't have survived. Just like you said, Colin, because most people don't survive a gunshot, and I wouldn't have, because I know how to shoot. I know how to. I mean, don't sound critical, but I know how to shoot to do that. But instead, I wind up taking a bunch of pills, and my brother was able to find me unconscious, but he found me and rushed me to the hospital and saved me. I mean, you guys all know that story. But it's important to just to give a second to think about it. And one thing I talk about a lot too is asking for help. I didn't have the courage to do it. As big tough guy as I am, and an alpha male and all that crap, to ask somebody for help when I was in that moment, I wasn't brave enough to do it.
So I do have a question for both JJ and Colleen. So like for somebody like me who has no idea what the what is it, Red, White, and Brady, is that or Brady
so
United?
Red, Blue, and Brady is the name
Red,
of the
Blue,
podcast.
okay, Red, Blue, and
just
Brady.
But Brady is the name of the
Mhm.
nonprofit that we work for. That's one of the
Okay.
oldest gun violence prevention
And
groups.
what is the mission of your nonprofit?
Oh, so Brady, kind of the quick and dirty, if you will, because we do so
Yes.
much, is that we work across Congress, courts, and communities to help
Mhm.
change the conversation and the reality of gun violence in the US.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's trying to come at this public health epidemic from every direction humanly necessary, talking to gun owners and non-gun owners alike in a bipartisan way to try to really affect change that's going to save lives.
Gotcha. And then when you say you interview people and you do the podcast, so you're interviewing people who have experience with guns or like experience with like kind of like what Cliff went through.
Yeah, so that's been one of the aims of Brady even creating a podcast was to kind of serve as both an educational and a community space for folks. So we have everything from survivors to activists to folks who have lost family members to researchers to health professionals and then folks who are kind of all of those identities, right? Because it is
Mhm.
certainly not uncommon for someone to become an activist after living through something or losing a family member, or for someone to go into research or medicine for those reasons. A lot of vets end up coming on the podcast for that reason, because I've yet to find a veteran that's comfortable just having one job. Everybody has at least 10,
True.
10
True.
areas that they're focused on.
Mhm.
And so and that's what I do specifically through kind of like as a communications arm and then maintaining those relationships throughout. And Family Fire kind of exists as an additional campaign, I would say, within Brady, that's really targeted at focusing on the storage aspect or the reaching out, I would say, to gun owning communities directly, or at least folks who are living in gun owning communities. And I don't know, Colleen, if you want to speak a little bit more about that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think what makes End Family Fire unique from other campaigns out there is we actually engage gun owners, right? Because we know we're not going to, for those that don't have a gun, don't have, knowledge about how to use a gun, utilize a gun, or it's hard for them just to preach and say, do this or do that. And so what we do is we convene everyone together around the same table. And we're saying, look at the number of lives lost each year to this issue. For suicide, we lose 67 people each and every day in the US to suicide by gun. And so we said, it's not sustainable. I've been with Brady a year and a half. I've seen that number increase twice. When I started at Brady back in March of last year, we had 63 people a day. I saw it reach 65.
When I started, it was 60.
And so we're trending in the wrong way. And so this is where we said everyone has a role in this. If you have kids visit your house, we have a campaign called Ask if there's a gun in the home, because
Mhm.
if they're playing and they're curious, let them at least know how what to do if they see a gun. Don't play with it, all of that. But for End Family Fire, it's more about safely store a gun. If you have a gun in the home, we don't say if you have a gun, we don't get Second Amendment, we don't get political, we don't get partisan. We work with the Ad Council, and it's basically just keep your gun safely stored in the house. Kids can't get into it. Someone else just visiting your home. And this goes for cars too, because we're seeing a lot of times, guns are getting stolen out of cars. And so we're saying just keep them safely stored. And then Cliff was involved. We could talk a little bit more about one of the campaigns under End Family Fire was called Safe Stories. And this profiled individuals who they were talking from their own perspective about why safe storage is important and why it was the key to saving their life.
That's wonderful. Cliff?
Yeah, and so I'm gonna find and post the links up. I posted a link to BradyUnited.org already
saw
in
that.
the chat, and then I'll post up there for the safe stories. That's what I was looking for while you were talking, Colin. So I
Yeah.
wasn't being disrespectful. So I can put the links up so people that are watching can click on it, and I'll get the link up there to the story. But it is very important, and I appreciate the fact that. Of course, Tom Cruise is a good friend of mine. He has a very moving story, and then of course the one mother that lost her son to suicide. Those are
Reba,
very
yeah.
touching stories, and we know lived experience really resonates a lot with people when we can go out and have the courage to tell our stories. And it's not always easy. It's hard because you're not talking about the best moments of your life, but I think it's important to tell and have that conversation because people hear all the time gun control, ban this, ban that, whatever. I think really for people, especially for veterans, I think changing the conversation, and I think with this campaign, we actually changed that conversation. And I think you guys are seeing the results of that, where people are looking and saying, "Oh, yeah, that does make sense." They're not calling me irresponsible. I'm a responsible gun owner. I'm not irresponsible, but maybe I just didn't think about another way or a better way to secure my weapons.
Or maybe you could secure your weapons unloaded and then keep the ammunition elsewhere, like at a different place. So that's kind of like what we do. I have the guns locked up and the ammunition's locked up somewhere else as well.
Yeah. And that's like in an ideal world, personally, what I would love for everyone to feel comfortable doing and for everyone to do is for a gun to be stored locked separate from ammunition. Like that's my ideal world.
Yeah.
But I also understand that my perspective on the world and my comfortability with firearms is not the same as everybody, even probably on this call, or certainly not for everybody that I interview, right? Of people who do choose to own firearms. So my thing, and what I really have loved about the work that Brady has been doing, and I think even what came up in this PSA, is meeting people where they are. That I want you to be as safe as humanly possible. So what do I have to do to make you feel comfortable having these conversations, to start maybe making some small changes? Even if it's just like reaching out to a buddy to hold your firearms. I'll take that any day, right? Yeah. Over nothing. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you guys are not necessarily saying like ban guns or like take away guns or whatever. It's just like, just be safe with what you have and lock it up. So,
and actually, if I saw a question come in on some of the chat too about there is a misperception, and I want to put a stat out there, because if you need it and you can't get it, it's too late. Well, there's a frightening stat that we have a brand new campaign that we're working on now for new gun owners to really dig into this. But studies show that you are more than 20% more likely to be injured by the gun in your home than you are to be able to protect your home from an intruder. And so that's just frightening on our end. So we're trying to work, really bring the gun industry to the table and say, let's talk about biometrics. Let's talk about opening the safe. Let's talk about the 3 seconds it takes to get all these open. Like, what can we do to decrease that time so that you have ready access to your firearm if you need it? But more than likely, how do we decrease injury from someone in your home or yourself from that same gun?
Yeah.
Because I will say, and not to cut you off at all, but, and I guess you'd be able to speak this even more, but as someone who has interviewed at this point now, so many parents who have lost children to unsecured firearms, some of them from gun owning families that said, we trained our kids so that they knew not to play with them. Well, because they thought they were comfortable with them, they made they made a mistake that a kid did, but it was a fatal mistake, right? Or, because, maybe they knew, but their friends didn't know. As someone who grew up with guns in the house, my dad's line was always, I trust you, I don't trust your friends, right? Like, so there were so many extra levels of security there that were present. And so it's something that can't be undone. And the guilt that these parents then live with after is crushing. And so my thing is whatever you have to do to keep you and your family safe, if you brought a firearm into your house to keep your family safe, you got to then make sure you're keeping your family safe from the tool that you brought into your home for protection.
Well, and I think, that goes back to responsible gun ownership and teaching your children about weapons. Both my children know how to fire weapons and know how to operate weapons. I, at a very young age, was operating weapons, but we were taught proper, weapons training. And then, in Missouri, when I was a kid, we had to take a hunter's education course. And during that course, it taught you about firearm safety and things to do in the woods and things like this. And you had to pass that in order to get your deer hunting tag or your hunting license. And so not only were you getting educated at home, but you also were getting that education at school. And you had to take that course in order to be able to go hunting. And I think that was very important because it talks about all those things. And I think that's been kind of left out is, these kids, especially in the inner cities, they really don't understand guns. They don't understand how they work, and you see all the times with these people just shooting wildly in the air and not understanding, bullet trajectory and what goes up must come down, and if you just randomly fire a weapon just because you think it's funny or cool, it can go off. I remember that one. I don't know if you guys saw that one Instagram thing where the young girl's playing with the pistol and it actually goes off and it misses her, and you see her hair fly up in the air as the bullet
Oh my
goes up to
gosh.
the screen up top. Yeah, I
Was
mean
that
it's just
recent
stupidity like
or?
that. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
but you, you you know, the second I see somebody and how they hold a gun, I can tell you how much experience they've had with or without that gun. I mean, I used to shoot on the National Guard, rifle team, and we
Yeah.
shot all kinds of guns on that team. And so, how somebody holds a gun or how they're moving around will tell you how much experience they have with that weapon or not. And that
And I
a
can
lot of these kids, especially the little ones, mom and dad don't have their gun locked, and their little toddler goes in and gets the gun and shoots his brothers, shoots his sisters. Those are sorry, those are sad and horrendous. And I got it. If you have a gun in your house for protection, then you need to find a way to have it safely stored where you can get to it in the need if somebody kicks in your door and wants to come in your house, right? You can do that. And there's ways to do that where your kids can't get access to it. I know that, right? I know that if you make it through my door, my house, and if you get past my dog, which is very highly unlikely, but if you do, you're not going to make it past my 45. But I know where it is and I know where to get it. You know what I'm saying? Because not only that, but also I train with it. You go through scenarios and say, okay, if this happens, or how fast can I get my gun? And you practice that because that's what we do in the military. And you
Mhm.
have that responsibility as a gun owner to do that. Just don't buy a gun and stick it in your nightstand and never use it, never fire it. Because in a moment of crisis, you're not going to be able to use it properly anyway, and you're going to wind up hurting somebody else instead of the reason that you have it.
Yeah, those images of people misusing guns on social media, or the stories of, dog shoots man because he left his gun loaded on the counter, and it jumps all the time, at least 8 a year. It's one of the weirdest stats I've learned as part of this job. I see those all the time. They come across my desk because of the work that I do. And what frightens me a lot is that particularly when we saw the rise of first time gun ownership over COVID, over lockdown, people were very fearful. People were very isolated. People were buying guns for the first time. And these are folks who are not buying guns and then say, taking a class. These are not folks that are buying guns and then, like, say, joining a shooting club to learn proper stuff. It's folks who are buying guns out of a sense of fear, brought them home, and now my fear is where are they now?
Yeah.
Right? Are they in the closet, forgotten? Are they in the junk drawer? Are they under the bed? Your life changes so quickly in the course of 2 or 3 years. So did you buy it and not have a child then, and now you do? Do you have roommates? What's happening? And so I think what you point out too is that, if you've trained and the lethality of these weapons or how to use them, you also then have to think about what do you do in terms of your care and keeping of them.
And same thing goes with prescription medications. It's no different. I mean, look how many young children, die from, getting into, eating medication or the pods from the laundry, right?
The
Kids get
Tide
killed
Pod.
all the time from eating those pods because they looks like candy. Now
Let's
you got
I
to
think
safeguard that. I mean, it's crazy.
Colleen, do you want to share a little bit more about Ask? Because I think it's kind of the same thing, right? In the same way you don't just leave your bleach out under the sink.
Yep.
Like,
And so you're talking, those are all my previous jobs before Brady. So I worked in the household product industry where kids were getting into bleach and things like that and inhaling it and dying. We were losing, hundreds of kids each year. And then I moved over to medication safety where it was the same thing, from the Tide Pods to getting into like cough and cold medicines. And so again, we're seeing that. And this is just it's just like another product, right? Where, kids are getting into them if they're not safely stored. And so one of the campaigns that we do, we lose 8 kids a day, by the way, in the United States each and every day to family fire, which is, finding a gun in the home and accidentally injuring yourself. So
Wow.
I think that's those numbers, again, if you start adding them up, that's 8 children every single day in the country. Add on to that, gun suicide, 67 individuals each and every day. So I think we're saying, just be responsible gun owners. The question is, if your kids are trained, that's great. But our concern is too, if you move and you have a play date, or if your kid does not have that awareness and is over in a house and sees a gun and just doesn't have that awareness of like, hey, I want to play with this, and then gets injured. So there's something on June 21st, each and every year. It's called Ask, ASK, and that's Asking Saves Kids. And this is all it asks is, if you're going to have a play date, or if your kid who maybe doesn't have knowledge about guns, is going to another home, is visiting a grandparent, is out wherever, just, ask if there's a gun in the home. And if so, then you make that decision of whether or not you want your kid to play there. So that's kind of, talk to your kids about it, make sure that wherever they're playing, that they have the knowledge to make good decisions as well.
Mm-hmm. And that's one thing I talked to my kids about. I said, one, if there's not an adult around, you have no business being around a weapon. I mean, just because of their age, especially with Lloyd being young enough. And I said, if you go to a friend's house and they do that, then you need to alert an adult and let him know what's going on. And don't be afraid to do that. I said, because I guarantee you that kid's not supposed to be having that weapon. And of course, outside of going in the kids' room, my kids are also told that you don't go into adults' bedrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we've taught that our kids at a very young age that you don't play in mom and dad's room. If you're playing hide and seek or whatever, you don't go into our room, but you never go into your friends' parents' room either. That goes both ways. But I do think that I like that ask because I think sometimes we forget about that.
Yep.
And there may be some people who has guns in their kitchen, who has guns in every room of their house because they're nervous or scared about something.
I live in Florida, and everybody carries a gun in their purse or in their pocket or in their car, in their glove compartment, because we have concealed carry where you don't even have to have a license to carry in Florida. So they just passed that recently. And so it's like, it's everywhere. I mean, just the other day, I think it was an 11-year-old was getting bullied and chased down and went into his mother's car in the glove compartment and shot two teenagers, like a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old. But so they're investigating that case. Like, why does the kid have access? How come the glove compartment wasn't locked? Is it self-defense because these kids were chasing after him? Like, and he's only 11. Yeah. 11 years old.
And there's two things there that I think are so interesting. One, everybody, because we're named Brady after Jim Brady, who was Ronald Reagan's press secretary, who was injured during the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. And then he and his wife, Sarah, became very known gun violence prevention advocates, joined an existing organization that had been started by a survivor who had lost a relative to handgun violence. And then thus Colleen and I are now here getting to talk to you wonderful people.
Yeah.
But Sarah, his wife, had actually been involved in gun violence prevention work even prior to him being shot. Everyone always forgets that, but she was the daughter of a law enforcement officer, had always grown up around guns, knew shooting. But she got involved after her son literally reached in when they were having a play date with another parent, just reached in between kind of the old school, I'm going to date myself, but like the old, when the console of the car was just like that solid plastic and you could open it from the back too, reached into the console and pulled out a loaded firearm while he was driving on a play date when he was only like 6 or 7. And she was horrified that people just could, that because in her particular gun owning experience, you never left your gun unlocked and loaded in a car. Right. And so she was terrified of kind of that. And that's what got her involved. And that's what we're seeing increasingly is guns in cars that then are so easily accessible for folks to take and then to be used in crime.
That is the first question. That's the first question the police will ask if your car has been vandalized or theft. They ask, do you have any guns? Did you have any guns in the car? So yeah, it's super common here in Florida. Super common.
Well, I mean, I grew up in Missouri, it was the same way. But when I was a kid going to school, especially after Christmas, we all had gun racks and guns in our vehicles, but we didn't have school shootings back then. But why is it? I think it comes down to parents and parents' responsibility. I think it's me as a parent, as a child, needs to teach them how to be responsible, not only with guns, but in society as a whole. And that onus is on parents. That's not on anybody else. I'm sorry. And that's just how I feel. And if people feel the other way, then you can. It's America. You can feel that way. But it was my responsibility that I teach my sons to be respectful to everybody. I teach my sons to be, good handlers of weapons. I teach my sons to appreciate the environment. We garden and stuff. And if you take an animal's life, it's for a reason, and you're going to eat that animal. You're just not going to arbitrarily go out and shoot something or kill something. And so that's what I taught my children, because to me that was important, because that's how I grew up.
I think if I can answer a question from the chat too, I see someone said I would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And I think that's something we hear all the time. Maybe Colin, you could probably, I think, absolutely answer this better than I can. But I think that the argument is not that you shouldn't or that you can't have it.
Mhm.
I think it's that if you have it, I think people need to be very honest with themselves about how they're doing, about their life circumstance, about who is in their home, and make adjustments in order to be responsible surrounding that. So if you are going, if you know that you are having issues of suicidality, right? That is not your fault, but you need to then be comfortable like reaching out to someone or making some changes in terms of storage that are going to maybe delay and give you opportunity. And I think, Colleen, maybe if you want to touch on
Yeah, I also just don't want to put the onus all on the individual to reach out, right?
Fair.
But your buddy check comes in, and there's a national movement right now, I think, for the day after Veterans Day to make it a priority to call and check on your buddies and to, call a vet and make sure that everyone's okay. And I think there is, someone may not understand that they're struggling, but you'll know by talking to them and just check on them. And if you're concerned for your buddy, then just make sure that they don't have ready access to an unsecured firearm, right? And that's just, it's good practice if watching out for one another, for an individual and for suicidality, for yourself, obviously too. But for the kids aspect, kids are curious, right? So they're going to go exploring. We just had someone the other day that said, "It's all right. My kid doesn't read, so I keep the gun on the bookshelf. They'll never find it." Well, they found it. An older brother found the kid playing with it and was able to say, "Hey, he's handling a gun." So it's just like you said, Cliff, like educate your kids, but also, I mean, the kids are curious and they're smart, right? They're going to be able to figure out, they're going to explore. So like JJ said, if you do have a gun, just keep it safely stored so that someone, either a kid doesn't get access when they shouldn't have it, or if someone's in crisis, they don't have ready access. Put a little barrier in between them and their weapon to save their life.
Well, and if you're a first time gun owner, and you guys brought this up, you need to take classes. You need to go to the range. You need to know how to disassemble that weapon, clean it, and properly maintain it, just like with everything else, like you do the car and everything else. My weapon is unloaded and my magazine's in a different area, but I guarantee you within 3 seconds, I can have that gun loaded and ready to shoot. Right? Because I trained that way, or less. Just depends what's going on. But I'm just saying that you can train yourself to have that magazine and that weapon in 2 different locations and very quickly get to it. There's no reason to have that magazine and that gun in your nightstand, whether there's a shell in it, whether there's a bullet in the barrel or not. There's no reason to have it that way, with safety's on or not. There's no reason to have that. If you train right with that gun, anybody out there who's been on shooting teams will know this. You can very easily take that gun and have it at 2 different places, pop that clip in, cock it, and then you'll be ready to go. I mean, if you train that way. If you don't, I think you're just setting yourself up, and there's no reason for it nowadays. I mean, it's all about being smart. It's all about being responsible, and putting on your big panties or big pants, whatever you want to say, and going and getting the training that you need to do to operate it. It's just the same with a car or anything else. Just be responsible, because I guarantee you, if you don't, you're gonna wish for the rest of life that you did have if something would happen horribly.
I think too, one of the things, I think when we say kids, people just picture like toddlers and small children running around your home. Like, I think we have to have the conversation too about young adults, about teenagers, and how that's a whole different ball game. We're seeing now firearm suicide increasing amongst teens at a rate that is terrifying. I mean, any increase is awful, but like just the way that it has jumped since COVID, there's a number of reasons we could talk about for probably why that is. But that's a different ballgame as well, too, because then I think we have to talk about teens also maybe being in crisis. So you're not necessarily protecting the gun from someone who is curious. You are also protecting the gun from someone who is in crisis, who is in your home, who may not be forthcoming, right, about the fact that they are in crisis. And then that's kind of the responsibility of the adults in the room.
Oh, absolutely.
To
Well,
pop
just
in
like
for
Brittany
them.
said, adulting. But, here's a good example. My son was a sophomore in high school. A kid that he was in school with got in trouble. His parents took his phone away from him. He went right upstairs and got a gun, shot, and killed himself.
Oh
Within
my gosh.
minutes. It just happens that quick. I mean, we can go in conversation about being addicted to their phones and having withdrawals. But, I mean, my question is, and it's a horrible story, is how is he able to get access to that gun that quickly? Right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense. Now, my son had a gun that was in his room, but he wasn't allowed to keep any ammo. The ammo was kept in my safe in my closet. So he could have his gun in his room, but he wasn't allowed to have any ammo. And while he was at school, I would always check his room. But he never had any in there, but I would always check. But even when he had bow and arrows, we all trained with bows. We got crossbows and things like that. I mean, it just doesn't have to be a gun. And when the kids are out shooting the bow and arrow practicing, and the neighbor kids are around, of course, I'm always out there, but I always teach them, how to properly do that, because somebody can get killed with a bow and arrow.
Yeah, anything can be used as a weapon.
Yeah. I mean, like yard darts.
Yeah, it's just the we have to have, I think, that conversation about like the lethality, right? Because again, of how I've been fortunate enough now, again, from the podcast I've had several firearm suicide survivors come on, but I've also unfortunately since lost one of the folks who came on the podcast because of, after effects from her injury. And so but it's so rare to be able to talk to folks, either one, because it's a lot of, and that's why I so appreciated everyone who came on the PSA, especially folks like you, Cliff, who were like, it can be I think sometimes really hard. It feels shameful. It feels embarrassing. It feels like airing family laundry out. But then also it's just hard to find folks because so few folks survive it, right? To share that aspect, there's unfortunately so many families who have lost someone who can talk about what that's like. But for folks who have been in that moment of crisis, it's really hard for me to find anecdotal stories about it because it's just so rare that those folks are still with us.
And I will tell you that I was very appreciative, because when I go out and do a speaking event, I always ask to make sure there's some type of healthcare personnel, because it can be a triggering event. You guys are very good about following up. Hey, you're doing okay. If you need resources, here are some resources, as you were doing the ad campaign. And that was very nice to see, because, sometimes it doesn't happen. And for somebody to tell their story, especially if they're not used to telling it, even though I've done it a lot, it's not easy. And if I do too many speaking events in a row, it takes a mental toll on me. Well, it'll wipe me out for weeks, because, it's not just the telling your story, it's the stories you hear from others. And sometimes people come up and talk to you, and it's the first time they've told this story. And it's not good stories, right? You don't hear that, I remember I was doing a speaking event one time, and I'm not going to get too graphic on it, but a lady come up, and she actually was at a family reunion. Her uncle was riding a four-wheeler with her 6-year-old and went through a wire, and she saw her young son get decapitated on an accident. That was the first time in 30 years she spoke about that. And so you sit there and you listen to those stories, and it does take a mental toll on you also, because now you think about it, right? You think about how horrible it was, especially if you have a son around that same age. And so I always caution people that when you do want to tell your story, and I think everybody should tell their story if they're comfortable with it. Everybody's story is important. Just make sure that you're ready for it, because sometimes it can take you down a dark road again that you probably don't want to go back down again. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great resources out there to how to tell your story, right? I think American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has some, TAPS has others, and I think like you said, I mean, I talked to someone Monday night who 2 weeks ago tried to take his own life and got out of the hospital a week ago, and he was sharing his story publicly, and which is very dangerous. And so we made sure to get him help right away.
Yeah, it's tough. And it's an important conversation to have. It helps reduce the stigma associated with asking for help. But also it puts a real face to an issue, to a problem, right? Because a lot of times you hear it on the news, oh, well, 22 days, completing suicide, or this, that. Well, that doesn't mean anything to anybody, until you put a face to it. I mean, just like my suicide attempt had to do with 9/11. The ad council came up with, and the Brady Unite on the thing, and I share that on my screen because I think that's a really powerful message. And then when you throw a face on it, I think it just makes it more personable. And it's sad to see not only the rising rates in men, but the rising rates in young women with suicide. And we've seen such an increase of that. And kids as young as 6 years old completing suicide. I mean, really?
I wonder if you can just share, Cliff, for folks who haven't seen it. I can drop it in the chat as well, but could you share what the PSA, like what the goal of the PSA was that you and those other folks were on? Because we've mentioned it, but I don't think we've been explicit about it.
Well, right. And so for me going on, I think the importance of it was the importance of gun safety and gun locks, right? Because a lot of people, when they hear, um, you know, gun locks or anything like that, you lose a conversation, or gun control, or you lose a conversation. And really, to me, that whole, I think it was 6 stories you guys did, was really just to kind of change the conversation and try to get people to think about it in a different way. And that's not easy to do because everybody gets their opinions and they get very emotional about gun control, right? Because if you're a responsible gun owner and somebody says, "Oh, you got to put a gun lock on your gun and whatever," well, you're assuming I'm irresponsible, and I'm not. I'm a responsible guy. So then you just lose. Then you lose the argument, and the people get too emotional about it. When in reality, what we're saying is, "Hey, look, I'm Cliff Bauman. I went through a lot of crap. My mind was screwed up. I didn't want to live no more." And that's a messed up place to be, right? When you get to that point where you no longer want to live and you want to take your own life, I'm sorry, that's a messed up place to be. And I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I didn't find a gun.
Thankfully.
So we have to, but I found a bottle of pills, right? You just got to have that second. Because I'm telling you, it'll make all the difference in the world. And I think the stats will prove that. And I think that's one of the things that the Ad Council was trying to do in the Brady United with this PSA was, here are 6 stories, but very different stories. My story is different from Tom Cruise's story, where he tried to kill himself and his wife, to the lady who lost her son and the other story. So it hits all different facets of different people with different lives, different backgrounds, growing up differently, different races. And so really it kind of encompasses everything. And I think that's why it's gone so well, is because you change the conversation, you put a face to it, you put something historically that a lot of people remember 9/11 and what went on. And I think when you read those stories or you watch the video, especially Tom's video, and then I forget the lady's name whose son completed suicide.
Reba.
Yeah. When you watch those videos, it's heart wrenching. But Tom does a very good job about it. Is it puts you in that moment, and then if you're a parent or if you were somebody else similar to that, you can connect with that. And I think before, with gun control and gun locks, I don't think they had that. I mean, in military they have ACE training. They have, we have our alcohol training. And sexual harassment training, all that, right? And they always have gun locks, and they preach gun locks, gun locks, gun locks. There was never a story behind on why, right? They throw stats out there and they do that, but they didn't put a face to it. So, and I think with this PSA campaign, and maybe I'm not explaining it right, but I think I am.
You are
putting faces to it, and people of different backgrounds, male, female, black, white, whatever, that really makes it, the story, more encompassing to everybody, right? And so me as a veteran, Tom's a veteran, but our stories are different. His was going to be murder by suicide. Mine was just taking my own life. So some people might, domestic awareness, domestic violence awareness month. Some people might relate to that because they just get so angry at their spouse or whomever, and they jump to the violence. And maybe when you watch Tom's story, you might think, maybe I need to do something different or think differently. Same with my story is I preach this all the time. To go from where I was from A to Z took about a year. The sad thing is, these kids nowadays will go from A to Z in a microsecond. Because the suicide has become an option. To me, it took a while to get there. They're doing it this way quickly. And so we have to do something to stop that fast train of thought, and it's hard. And not to go too much farther on this, but here's a story. When I was with the DAIG inspection team, we were out looking at the suicide prevention program across all DOD, Department of Defense. We went, I forget, I'm not going to say what state it was, but somewhere in the Midwest. But anyway, so we're talking to a psychologist, and we had this young soldier who was suicidal, right? And so the unit did everything. They took his guns away. They were making sure he was getting all of his counseling and doing everything they were supposed to do by the book. And they thought the kid was doing okay. Do you know what the kid did? He went on leave several states away to an uncle's house to get access to a gun to complete suicide. And so with this campaign, I think too, you have to look not only at yourself here in this moment in your circle, but you need to broaden your circle and see if I'm in crisis or a family member's in crisis, I need to let the family know because they may go to your house, or an aunt's and uncle's house, a cousin's house, whomever house, and just let them be aware of that so-and-so is having an issue and problem. And I think that's a hard conversation to have. It's not easy, but I think it's a necessary conversation to have.
Well, and that's why asking is so important, right? Because if your child's best friend is going through a crisis, but their parents don't know that you may have an unsecured firearm in your home, right? So there's just all of these levels that if we just have sort of, I think, if we get more comfortable with having these conversations that too often people don't because guns feel taboo and suicide feels taboo when you mix those together with American politics and it gets real messy really fast. And people are like, I just want to enjoy the potluck. I don't want to have these conversations. But if we normalize this a lot more, I think that's going to help save a lot of lives too.
I think as long as we keep it purple, I think you'll reach people who are red, you'll reach people who are blue, and then we can maybe get what we're trying to get after is save lives, because I know what it's like to be in that point. And I never want anybody to get there. That's why I have my podcast and I do all that I do, because I never want anybody to be where I was at. That's why everybody's on this podcast today, and everybody's doing what they do. I mean, Lynn, you volunteer a lot of your time with the Reverend Warriors and all the things you do. Of course, JJ and Colleen with what you guys do with Brady United. And Colleen, I know you worked with a lot of areas before you went to Brady. And so we all do that because we don't want anybody to have to live with that pain, right? They say roughly every 42 seconds, somebody completes suicide, and every 43 seconds for the rest of their life, somebody wonders if they could have done something differently to stop that.
Exactly. And that ripple effect from, for every individual lost to suicide, how many people are impacted? Now, Dr. Julie Searle has done a lot of work on this. And, previously it was thought maybe 6 people, but it's more than 135. Some estimates all the way up to 300 people, right? Because every person you intersect with, every person that maybe has a connection to you through someone else, those are that many people impacted by a choice that you made. And like you said, we all want you, or whoever you are out there, the world is definitely better with you in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to wrap this up here. I would like Colin or JJ, if you have anything else to say, final word, and then Lynn will go to you, and then I'll close out.
Yeah, I know, Jody. JJ, you're going to talk about the Shorty Award, so I'll just say, if I could just encourage everyone encouraged just to go visit endfamilyfire.org. You can see all of our campaigns. You can also see our safe stories that we've been talking about as well.
Yeah, I would think for Brady's work more broadly, you can find us at bradyunited.org or on any social media site. We're at Brady Buzz, BRADYBUZZ. Please reach out to us with questions and comments and concerns, like engage in a dialogue with us. We want to hear from people. You can find the podcast, Red, Blue, and Brady, wherever you listen to podcasts. And the episode with Cliff is dropping in the new year. So it's a great time to listen now and subscribe, get ready to get to hear him in a different venue. I am really excited because the podcast is up for a Shorty Award again this year for Best Use of Podcast. Thank you. But also Cliff's PSA is as well. It is up for an award for special project. And this is huge. This is really great. They've dropped that in the chat for everyone who's looking at this. And then 2 other PSAs that End Family Fire has done with their partners are also up for Best PSA and Best Short Form Video. So if you go to Shorty Awards, SHORTY, AWARDS.com, and just look for Brady. If you do a Control-F search for Brady, you'll see all 4 of those. You can vote every day. Voting is free. Mm-hmm. And that would allow us to win a fan award. But the biggest thing for this is that the more people who vote, the more we get featured on their social media, right? And then someone sees it. And that's the big thing is I want every eyeball to see Cliff's PSA. I want everybody to hear the podcast and hear the stories, the actual research that's there, the conversations that are happening there that are like, you can't tweet a conversation like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So having 30 minutes to sit with someone and have an honest conversation, I think is so helpful. And we know because we get letters after the PSAs, after the podcast from folks who have changed their behavior, or who I think of one in particular wrote in, said that she saw the PSA, decided to go out that minute and buy a gun lock, bought a gun lock even though she thought her kid didn't have access. A few days after, was called into school because her son had written a letter to a teacher that he was looking for the gun and couldn't find it. So they decided to lock it up. So these things matter. These conversations matter. And so I think maybe that's what I want to leave it with, is that, one, please go vote for us. We like to win, but also just share with your friends and your family, share with your network, so that they know that there are these resources there, and that there's a big community of people who, even though we don't love you, we don't know you, we love you and want you to be happy and safe. And we're trying to do that.
Absolutely.
Woo! That was my plug.
So a lot of the issues we talked about today is hard hitting, and it can be triggering. So if you have been affected by any of this, please reach out to somebody. And if you know anybody or you yourself are a victim of domestic violence, there is the hotline.org, and it's a very safe website, because you can just click on a red X like twice and then like closes out right away. Like if you're scared, or you could press escape and then that whole website closes down right away. The phone number for domestic violence is 1-800-799-SAFE. So if you know anybody or you yourself are, a victim of that, get yourself some resources, get yourself some help. There are people there for you, and you are not alone. And that's what I have to say today.
Well, first of all, Lynn, thanks for that. That's great, important, because I think we forget that sometimes. And also, if you're also in crisis, you can also text home to 741-741 or the 988 number. Now you can text that too, and reach out to a crisis counsel you can to talk to and help you through that. It's very important. Don't be like me, because Cliff Ballmer didn't do that. I didn't ask for help. But Colleen and JJ, I know you both are very busy. I want to say thank you for coming on my podcast, The Mental Health Warrior. I think for the Brady United, I'm sorry, people think you're a very liberal organization, and for a lot of veterans, they shut you off. And I think by me and Tom coming on there and proving to them that you guys are really not trying to take guns away, you just want people to be more responsible for their guns. And so I asked my veteran community out there to go out there and take a chance to look at Brady United, because you'll change your opinion of them, because I did. Because I will tell you, I had that bias. I'd just be honest. But once you educate yourself a little bit, then you realize it's not. Go ahead. What are you saying, JJ?
I was just saying, I had my email. I also dropped in the thread of this. It's jjanflone@bradyunited.org. Message me. If you have those same trepidations that Cliff does, please email me. I think that's one of the best things about the podcast is, again, I get to have these conversations with folks who are understandably skeptical, because the gun violence prevention movement hasn't done a great marketing job in the past. And so it's left out a lot of people who I think actually agree with what we're doing. They just don't know that we're doing it. And so any support that we can give, whether it's because you're concerned about intimate partner violence or safe storage or other issues we didn't get to today, like, please reach out either through the podcast, through that email, through Twitter. And can we stop with like a round of applause for Cliff for being so brave to like join the PSA and do all of that, even though you were skeptical of our designs on you? Like, you were still so great to do it. And that's a huge leap of faith. So
Yay. Well, and I will tell you, when I went up and recorded for your podcast, I was being teased by my veterans friends, and I was going in the lion's den, and I said, no, it's nothing like that. But if you looked at the PSA and saw what we did, and the links are out there, they're all in the chat, and I'll share some later on, or share them tomorrow. Go out there, take a look, educate yourself, just like we talked about educating yourself with your firearm. It's very important. And as we got the QR code up there, as you can see it for Weeds Across America Radio, please take your time to donate to ensure that veterans do have that wreath on their tombstone during the holiday season. It's so very important, and so very thankful for all the people who served, prior to me serving. And so we all are here because of somebody else's sacrifice, just the way it is. Also, my book is now available, The Mental Health Warrior. You can click on that QR code. You can go out to amplify.com. There where you can order your book. You can also get through Amazon, anywhere, Barnes & Noble, wherever. But if you go to my website, cliffordballman.com, and buy the book through there, I will personally autograph it and ship it out. Now, my shipping fees are a little bit more because I'm not a big book company, and so you'll pay a little bit extra. But what I'm finding out is, depending on where people live, sometimes when I print off the label, it's cheaper. So then they get a couple of bucks in their in their box when they get their book, so they can use it for bookmarks. But hey, if you missed the show today, or if you just want to listen to it again, I'm on Reads Across America Radio at Fridays at 8 p.m. and Sundays at 10 p.m. Just like I said earlier, it's super easy to find. Just download your favorite app, whether it's iHeartRadio app, your Odyssey app, a TuneIn app. Search for Reads Across America Radio. This episode will play this Friday and this Sunday, so you can rewatch it and re-listen to it. And listen, we are our brothers and sisters keepers. And so if you notice somebody who's gone a little bit of quiet, maybe they're distressful, they may not be suicidal, let's take a moment and be human beings and ask if you're doing okay. Let's talk to somebody and let's have that conversation, because you never know. In my mental health minutes, I'm talking about changing the mental game this week. Just a kind word can really change somebody's perspective if they're not in a good place at that moment, at that second of that time. So you never know. So with that, thanks for tuning in to Mental Health Warrior. Everybody have a great and wonderful